Take two.
Welcome to the While You Grow podcast with Dr. Courtney Addison and me, Addison Powell, where we will dive into all things pediatrics, occupational therapy, and other important topics around children and development. So, if you are a parent, occupational therapist, student, or just want to learn more about occupational therapy and pediatrics in general, then keep listening. For more information on the podcast and to follow us on social media, take a look in the show notes. Let's get started.
Well, welcome to the While You Grow podcast.
Yes. Here we are again.
Here we are again. We have not Doctor yet.
No.
We have Travis Heaton here.
Yep.
Business owner, entrepreneur, OTA, Dad of the Year, Professor of the Year.
Would
with
Maddie
us.
think that? Would you think you're the dad of the year?
I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah. Just ask my wife. She'll tell you real quick. I can, so like this weekend I have to go to class in Florida, and she'll be just tracking me all the way, wanting to know where I'm at. Now, my wife can go out of town. Not a worry in the world. Like, it's fine as long as I'm there. So, yeah, I have to, that's my little shadow for sure.
No.
Yep.
So sweet. I love Maddie. She's so sweet.
She is. All right, so Travis, you may feel this way, but there's not many males in occupational therapy. How do you feel about being one of the very few?
It's an odd one. We're kind of like the Yetis of the field. You don't often see one in the wild, and you really don't see many of us work in pediatrics.
Right.
Yeah.
And to be honest, we were talking a little bit about this earlier. I think it's a kind of a personality that gets drawn into occupational therapy. And I don't think there's a lot of males out there that fit that mold. Like, I don't see many males choosing it just because, I mean, for instance, what I've done is, pediatrics. So you're playing with kids all day, and a lot of guys, that is not something they want to do.
Not really what they are.
But I love it. I feel guilty for getting paid for it. So.
So how long have you been an OTA?
How long have I been? 12 years?
12 years?
12 years now? Yeah, 12.
12, and you own your own business,
Yeah.
Heaton Pediatrics in Simpsonville, South Carolina. Talk a little bit about what your business model is.
So we work primarily in early intervention. So your birth to 3 programs is kind of our majority of our clients. But, of course, we keep them on for much longer than that. So as long as they're needing us, we stay going there. So we primarily work in homes, daycares, some schools, and then that's our primary practice.
Primary practice. So today's our topic, and I feel like not the same, but one, you're in the OT profession. You're also a parent of a beautiful girl who has a special need, but you're also a professor. So talk a little bit about how that all kind of works together for you in your personal life.
Yeah, that's kind of a tough question. Like, it just kind of goes. I guess with Maddie, like, because it kind of comes up a lot, like, oh, she's probably doing so well because you've always been in the field. But I really didn't get in the field until after she was born.
Yeah.
I was looking to going into a different direction in school, and that kind of opened my eyes up to occupational therapy, which is one of those that you rarely hear someone at 4 years old decided they wanted to be an OT. It rarely happens that way. And so that's how I found it. So when she was in those prime early intervention days, like, I was in school. So I really wasn't in OT at that point. Was just getting started with it. And so we're really with that, like, they're kind of separate, really. I've never really done a whole lot of treatment with her. Now, obviously, having that knowledge, there's things you do, but I've just really been dad, so each of those roles are really kind of separate in that respect, where I bring some of that into that dad role, but it's not like our primary focus. We're just trying to be family, and have family time. We try not to get too in depth with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, for those that are watching, listening, that don't know you and don't know Maddie, why don't you tell us a little bit about Maddie?
Yeah, so Maddie is 16 years old now. and will be actually 17 this year in March. So she's getting a little older. Born with Down syndrome. We were one of those families who didn't know ahead of time, which was odd because we had the 3D. Had a lot of 3D ultrasounds done back then, and really then it wasn't a big thing. But my wife had gestational diabetes, so we were having these really in-depth scans that found nothing. And then she was born, and our story is a little unique in that aspect too, because of the doctor wasn't sure 100% in the beginning, because she did kind of come out swole up a little bit, so to speak, because of the gestational diabetes. My wife didn't have to take medications or anything, but it still affected her a little bit, and so the features weren't quite as prominent, and the muscle tone was lacking, but he was 50-50 on it, and he told us, I never really say that. He said, but at this one, I'm really 50-50, where you need to wait for the genetic testing to come back.
Yeah.
And then Greenwood Genetics was it takes some time to get those then. So it was a good 6-week wait before we really truly knew that was the case. I mean, by that point we'd kind of put it together and figured, I think that is what's going on here. But she was so healthy. Like, she's really not had a lot of health issues. I'd say we've had tubes put in her ears a few times, and she had adenoids and tonsils removed.
Very normal.
Yeah.
That's all.
And about a year or so ago, she had to have her gallbladder taken out.
Very normal.
Yeah, normal stuff. Like, we really been fortunate with her, where the health-wise, she's been really healthy, and then sometimes that can be not the case with that diagnosis. But yeah, she's doing great, and just a mess at times.
She's hilarious. She is. She will tell you like it is.
Oh yeah, there's no filter on that kid. It is for sure.
I'll tell you.
That just, I don't know if that's an extra chromosome thing or what. But there is zero filter on her. Whatever pops in her head is going to come out.
Hey, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
We need some honesty in the world.
We do. So one of the big things about this podcast too is we want to talk about rural access to healthcare and services.
Oh, okay.
We've talked a little bit too between us about just how hard it is to get services around here, and it is that. But what strategies would you give parents listening, or other OTs out there listening, for their parents to help access the services in the best way possible? Depending on the need.
Yeah. And then that's really how we started our business. At first, we didn't really have a plan to start a business when I got into the field. And what we found, even with us, we live not far from the city. I mean, we're maybe 8 minutes and you're in Simpsonville, but we're considered in the middle of nowhere. And so we really had a hard time, even for us, to get therapists to come just that far. Yeah. So we started recognizing that, and when I started, I started in early intervention, working in the natural environment, and that was my goal, was to go wherever. And so I would go to all these places that were truly way out from any city. And but we saw that was a real lacking thing, and BabyNet, our early intervention program, had reported that was a problem for them too, finding therapists in those areas. And so that's really why we started our business, was to hire people with the idea that you will travel. Like, we're going to pay you as well as we can, but we're going to ask this in return. That's our biggest ask of people, is that they'll go to those areas.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, to me, it's hard to give parents advice on what to do, because they're oftentimes like, I can't tell them, hey, you need to move closer to the city. That's not feasible for most of them. And so to me, it's on us as practitioners to serve our communities better, and not just want to stick in this little tiny zone that you live in. Yep. Is to go out there and see them. And it really didn't affect my caseloads any. Like, I could still fit in the same as therapists who work for me who have a tight window where they work. It's definitely, you can do it. And it didn't really cost me financially by having to travel more. You just schedule your day appropriately, and it works out.
Yeah.
So I think it's on us to to serve our community better.
Oh yeah, definitely trying to get out there in those places that don't have those types of services close by. But yeah, I guess I'm blinking.
Okay, well, I'm never blinking. I always have a lot
Ask
of
away.
questions,
Yeah.
and I think we've had some parents follow this. What has been the biggest challenge you face as a parent with a child with Down syndrome?
And I guess thinking of challenges, there's been a lot, and it kind of comes at different phases. So just thinking of the phase she's in now, being as old as she is, she wants to do the normal things. Mm-hmm. But I know, like, she's really big on wanting to drive.
Oh, Lord.
This doesn't seem like a great idea. And it's not.
Right now.
Right now. And I don't know if it will be. I think I was just talking to someone about it. Like, I think with perfect conditions, she could do it.
Yeah.
But someone honks the horn, someone swerves in front of her, like, her reaction time is just different. It's slower, and that's really not going to change a lot outside of some new intervention that comes up that can fix an extra copy of a chromosome. So I really truly don't think it's an option to truly have a driver's license, drive on the road, and I really don't know if my insurance would even insure us. Really thinking about the way insurance works, I'm not sure my car insurance would allow it to begin with, because it would be a huge risk on them. So you get a lot of things like that. She talks about wanting to get married. She currently wants to move in 2 years. She's got a plan. She's going to move in 2 years. And the location changes often, but she's determined that that's what she's going to do. I blame my wife, because early on she was so worried she wouldn't have an imagination. That was like her biggest concern. So that was like, when she was young, my wife's biggest concern was she wouldn't have an imagination.
Now she's got a big one.
Well, she put it on us, because now that imagination runs wild. She's her and one of her friends, like, she talks to us all the time that they're going to go to Africa in 2 weeks. Oh. And she's been obsessed with Africa recently, and she wants to go to Africa. And I'm like, well, that requires a passport. And so it was, trying to explain to her that she wanted to go without me. And I was like, I don't think you really need to go to where you want to go without me. Like, there are some dangerous places in Africa. I was like, when we go to the zoo, you see those animals, a lot of them, that's where they live in the wild. And I was like, so I don't think it's a great idea for you and your pal to just up and go to Africa. Yeah. So to me, that, like, some of the biggest challenges, some of those things are the normal things that you would see kids do. Right. She wants to do too. Yeah. And there's just some of those things we're not sure. Like living on her own. We think she can have some kind of independence, but I think it more would be like a mother-in-law suite with us, where she can have a lot of independence. Because I really think with her, she can be independent in household items, from cooking to kind of managing a house. I think she could do all that and do it safely. It's more out in the community where there's not quite as much awareness of the condition as there should be, and that comes down to we do kind of hide these kids from the world. That's the way it has been. It's getting better, but that's the way it was. You hid that from everybody. We didn't, of course, but that's what happens. So people aren't really going to know how to deal with her, and then you have people who would take advantage of it. So her community aspect of that would be where I think difficult. And she's also been wanting a job lately. She wants a job, even though I'm like, well, you can just work for me. I can give you some work to do. No, I want to go work at Starbucks. I want to work at Starbucks, because she loves Starbucks.
Yes.
Don't we all? You'd have to pay me a lot of money to work at Starbucks.
You would not have to pay me that much. I love
free coffee, and I'd show up a couple of days a week, maybe.
Some people come in there, they complain about their drinks.
Oh, gosh. Well, it's just so interesting. And one of the articles I just read that kind of came out of the Tim Tebow kind of movement and what he does was that families with a kid with Down syndrome are so much happier than families without. Can you talk? Is that true for you guys, or
it's been
can
true.
You talk about that impact? Like,
I think
it was statistically
early on, not so much. For me, I'm more of a let's keep moving forward. Mm-hmm. So we got the diagnosis. I was all right. What do we do, and how do we help this child reach her max potential? Because you already know at that point, there is going to be a limitation of somewhat. With Down syndrome, you really don't know. It's a pretty wide variety of what you can get, depending on which genes are overexpressed, and which ones aren't, or which ones are under. So I was more good to just move forward. My wife wasn't as much, and she would tell you, it was rough on her in the beginning. And I think it come down to thinking about all the things like we just talked about. All the things that you want to do with your daughter, that she immediately just went there. She went 20 years down the road on day one. Yeah. And didn't really just in the moment just see where this takes us. But yeah, it really has. Once you get past the diagnosis and you just get to living life, and as they grow, you see that they're really just a cool little kid. They're not they're really not that much different. There's limitations, but there really not a lot of differences between her and someone that's her typical peer. They generally are really really happy for the most part, and they're loving little kids. She's always had a big heart, and trying to think what else. It's just hard to put a measurement on it. What is the thing that makes you so much happier? I think it really truly just changes you more than them. It just gives you a different perspective on life in general.
Right.
You go from this fast-paced, busy life to you really stop and smell the roses more. You celebrate the small things. Yeah. So it changes how you just see everything in general. It kind of changed our life goals on what we wanted to do with ourselves over our lives. I think that's the biggest impact it has, is just that mindset it gives you to really slow down and just enjoy life. You enjoy it more. And then we would have never done that without her. We'd have been, who knows what we'd be doing right now. Yeah. Because we'd be in the same race everybody else is. But now we just have a much different perspective on it that you just couldn't get without having to live it, really. Yeah. Yeah, I'd say that's the biggest thing. They are stubborn. So there is that aspect. So we're definitely happier than we would have been. But boy, when they don't want to do something, they don't want to do something. And they will not do something.
I saw that in one of my rotations. I had a little girl that she had Down syndrome, and she was absolutely adorable, so funny. But it was she was not. If she didn't want to do it, she was not going to do it. Yeah. No matter what you tried to bribe her with.
And that's what, not to kind of give you a question or to ask me, but already getting into one thing. One of the things you find difficult as a parent with Down syndrome is they do get generalized a lot. Mm-hmm. And there are some things, you're going to see it true amongst many of them, because it's just, for whatever reason, that's what happens. So the stubbornness, but you get told a lot, oh, they're always, such happy little gentle thing. And I'm like, you have no idea how awful this can be at times with her. But they get generalized a lot, but they are really so different. Amongst each other, it's just like anyone else, and they do get kind of put in that little box sometimes that really just shouldn't exist, because every one of them has a different personality, really, and a different set of things they're doing. So it's that is one thing that you do get frustrated with, that people don't realize that they're not all the same, really. There's such a wide variety there.
Yeah, and kind of going on that, what would you say are some common misconceptions about individuals?
They're always happy. That you probably get that a lot. They're not always happy. They do experience kind of the same range of emotions as everybody else, but they're generally pretty good. But that's really it to me, is the generalizations that kind of happen that we get hit with there. But yeah.
So we talked about last podcast about low tone, and you kind of talked about it already. explain to like some of the students that are listening and maybe the parents out there, what does that actually mean, and what does it mean in terms of like precautions with your child or things that just kind of in general, what does that low tone mean?
And so you'll see Down syndrome kids that are in adults, everyone, they're really strong. So you don't, they go, I thought they had low muscle tone. They're really strong, but it's really that resting tone that they don't have, that ready to react, that that general shape of your hand. They don't really have that because they're here. So imagine trying to catch a ball, and if you're really relaxed and not ready, and you throw it to you need an extra time to get that ready. And to me, that's the biggest thing with them on the muscle tone, is that state of readiness, and it's pretty global throughout their body, and that's the biggest thing with the muscle tone is there. And so it goes back to the driving thing. Well, I don't think it's a good idea for her to drive because she doesn't have that. Her reaction time is going to be so much slower than the average person. And that's the biggest aspect with low muscle tone for her, especially for the Down syndrome population in general. It's that ready tone. Really.
That ready tone.
Yeah, that resting tone, I guess.
That affects, if you think about tone in relation to muscles, we have muscles all over our body. So most of our kiddos with Down syndrome will receive speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy. There's other therapies out there too. Talk about, and especially for our parents, and I know I struggle with this, about balancing all those therapies and kind of deciding whether it's needed or if there's too much. I'm sure Maddie has gone through different therapies throughout, especially being with you as an OT. But how important are those therapies at early intervention, and then maybe how to navigate some of those therapies for your child?
Early on, you really do want it all, and it's a busy schedule because you're not only you usually got all three of the major disciplines. Yeah, it really is. You're going to have speech is going to be involved. And to me, speech is one of the ones that you'll keep longest, that and OT. Like, you're going to keep those two longest. PT is going to go away pretty quick out of your life. They're going to be there for so long, and then you can kind of drop that off to the wayside, because now we're looking at more functional skills, and you're going to want OT. But the speech has always been something that kind of carries over. And so we had speech for a very long time, up until probably 2 years ago, when we finally were like, all right, I think we've hit what we're going to get, and now we can drop that. But early on, you got those three disciplines. You have service coordination coming out, all the specialists you got to see, because you have to go to the heart doctor. You've got ears to be checked. You name it. If there's a specialist, they're probably going to see them, even if they don't have the issue, is to rule out the issue.
Yeah.
Right.
So you have a lot of doctor's visits in general, and you're going to be really busy with that, I'd say, for at least the first 2 or 3 years. That's just going to be your life, and it's needed, because especially that early on, because we want to catch these things early so they can do something about them. And you want the therapist involved early, because the earlier we get in, there's so many studies showing, the earlier you get in there, the better they are at achieving their maximum potential. So And to me, when they're that young, taking a break from something's a bigger deal, because 2 months to a 6-month-old is way different than 2 months to a full-grown adult. There's so much development they're going to do in that time period. Yeah. Which is, especially like with our company, we want to get out there as soon as we get the referral and as fast as we can, because every day matters in a really small child. There's just so many milestones in those first 3 years that they're going to hit. That's when to me it's the most important. So as they get a little older, that's when you can start telling off some of these. You can drop PT, you can drop, and it really depends on your kid what's most important to you at that time, and that's when you'll make those decisions on. It's really important for them to talk, so you want to keep speech, and you have to make those decisions on what's the most important for you at the end, and then start peeling off some of these layers that you don't need anymore, because we used to have to go to a heart doctor every year, and then it went to every 5 years. Now we don't have to go unless there's an issue.
Yeah.
So the specialists will drop off. Life will get a lot more normal as they start growing up.
Yeah. And kind of talking about like therapy and that kind of thing, for maybe the parent out there listening that has a kid with Down syndrome, maybe they're really young, can you talk about how therapy with Maddie has kind of like progressed and changed as she's which started really young, and then now she's getting older and clearly has big dreams and wants to do a lot of the quote unquote normal.
Yeah, and I would say the stuff you're doing early on, building those little skills that seem pretty insignificant at the time if you don't know the whole process of how things are going to work. That's the most important time, because when they do get older and they want to do all these things, if we didn't get that early on, we're not going to have the skills as we get older to do it. To me, that's my biggest takeaway from there is really making sure you get it early and kind of navigate that aspect. Yeah.
So what about now that she's older? Is she
that's right.
OT?
That was your question. Like, how we go? Yeah. So we still get OT, but we've trained. Yeah. Well, I mean, we have, and I've never treated her on my own. I'm sure that'd be some kind of ethical thing anyway. But so I didn't want to do that anyway. I want to come home from treating and then treat her. But it transitions so early on. You're in these much smaller skills, and then as you get a little older, it just kind of goes with their development. But as you know, now that we're 16, we're working on more life skills at this point, and we transitioned her to more life skills stuff a couple years ago. We asked the therapist to focus more on that. So we're looking at counting money, giving change, how much things cost, those type of things that you do in your day-to-day life. We wanted to start working on those things, and cooking and all the ADLs. Yeah. So we're looking at that's where our focus went then, was all right, now this is where we're at. We need to get her to the most independent she can be. That's the things we had to start focusing on. So your focus just kind of changes based on where they're at. So, they in those, 6 to where she's at now, you're looking at more academic type stuff, or handwriting and those kind of things. And then it just transitions eventually to more life skills and even job skills if she wants to go work.
I'm pretty sure she's pretty determined to do some of these.
Every time we go to Starbucks, it's like a pink drink or a dragon drink. Sometimes it's like both combined into one. And she's like, I need a pink drink and an application.
At least she doesn't ask.
She's like, no, she didn't say application. She says resume.
Resume.
She thinks they're supposed to give her a resume, I think, currently. And I was like, no, you have to make your own resume and turn it in. But I don't think Starbucks is going to require a resume. I think you just do an application and everything should be fine. But yeah, so she asked for an application every time we're there.
Wow.
And I just been avoiding it because I don't think you're going to stand for more than a few hours before, because that is one thing with her physically is where probably one of her biggest limitations is. Yeah. She can't do a lot of walking for long distances. And then it comes back to that resting tone. Like, it's not there, so even though she's walking, like her joints and stuff will hurt. Her knees and ankles will start to hurt after a good mile of walking. So I think standing, working would be difficult for her over a long period of time. There's no way she'd do 8 hours right now. She might get built up to it, but for her, and that's not true with all kids with this diagnosis, but for her, the physical limitations are probably some of her biggest, is what would limit her on a job like that, because Starbucks employees don't really sit.
Right. I've never seen them sit.
So I think it's at some point I'm just going to go to the owner and try to craft out a little job for her that maybe she can go and do, and so she can get that under her belt, because she really is determined to go work somewhere else besides for us. And I'm like, I got so many little gigs I could give you. You can work. And Starbucks.
Yes.
Starbucks.
Yeah.
Now you've hinted at this too, but knowing you for several years now too, you guys have designed your life to support Maddie. Not necessarily like letting it take over your life, but you're an entrepreneur, you guys love to travel, you have a business that has a lot of flexibility. What advice would you give parents for, I guess, like, what was the biggest support you guys received, or advice you could give to parents in this time?
I would say not to get wrapped up too much in the special programs. So our kids can there's a lot of programs in the schools for special needs kids in general. And I would say not to be too worried about that aspect, because I think you'll limit them by default by them being in those programs. A lot of times, just to be honest, like in that kind of program, the kid with this diagnosis sometimes going to be like the top of that class. And so them learning from their peers is going to be difficult in that case. So fighting for inclusion to me is the biggest thing for our kids. Like they need to be involved in daily life, because the bulk of that they can do. The academic side of it, they're going to hit a point at some point where we've kind of hit our thing, especially with math. Math seems to be a difficult area for all of them. But
everybody in general.
Well, yeah, some people in general. But that to me is like having them included in just not just with school, but just everyday life. Them being out, being seen, being involved with people, to me is like the most important thing that'll help them years down the road.
Yeah, definitely. So, you talked about like that inclusion and that kind of thing. For maybe a parent who their kid is like going through school, what other advice could you give in terms of like getting them the supports they need for school and
if you don't want to learn the law inside and out, like either hire an advocate, or there's a lot of places that will give you a free advocate. Like through sometimes your Down Syndrome Association will have one that they'll pay for. Having someone to go to the school to advocate to get everything you're supposed to get, because their idea of the least restrictive environment is way different than the rest of the world. So knowing that law so you can hold them to it, because the law's there and you can do it, but they'll avoid it at all costs. And that's been my experience in business and going and being that advocate for kids that I've treated. Is they're going to do, instead of the least restrictive environment, they're going to do the least amount they have to. Is what they do. And that's just the nature of it. They're trying to stay within their budget, and they want to spend as little money as possible. And that's the thing, knowing that law, because the law's there, and you can get anything you want. The one thing I tell parents a lot that they don't realize is they can call an IEP meeting anytime they want. So anytime something's not going your way, and you're not liking what's happening, you can call that meeting today. And they'll have to set it and make it happen. So you can call that anytime you want.
I've seen that with my nephew. He has autism, and there's just so many like rules and just how all of that works. A lot of people don't know, and you need to know how to like almost work the system to get what you, like you said, get what you can get.
You do. It's a constant battle, and that's why we homeschooled her. And we were fortunate that we could. Not everybody could have a parent stay at home and homeschool the child. We could do that. And early on, it was harder. We didn't make as much money as we do now. So it was way harder for one of us to stay home. But we did it, and because it was better for her. You knew that was going to be a fight. You may be in a good situation right now in this current classroom, and then when that classroom changes, the whole dynamic changes. You could get even just an aide in the class that just took a job and doesn't want to be there. That can make everything change. Or you could get a teacher who either doesn't have enough experience, or just, again, is just what they thought they wanted to do, but turned out they really didn't want to do this. Who doesn't do a good job. I mean, that happens everywhere. And so it changes so much. I know a lot of parents who every year they're fighting, whether it's our diagnosis or another one, autism, anything. It's a constant battle to get get them to do what they're supposed to do. Not necessarily what you want, but it is what you want, but it's really just holding them accountable. Holding the schools accountable is a job in itself. And we just didn't want that fight. And I was a proponent of homeschooling anyway. And I knew we wanted her to be able to experience everyday life like we talked about. I wanted her going to the post office, going to the grocery store. We wanted her in society, having that social aspect versus a school dynamic of social, which in my opinion only exists in school. After you get out of school, that whole dynamic never exists again. We wanted her to know how to talk to people in public and know how to get around and do things. And so homeschooling made a lot more sense, because then we truly could tailor it to her and do it a very individualized plan, because she's your only student. And so we could do what worked for her. We weren't tied to some curriculum or what the government told you had to teach. There were certain things you had to cover, but you don't have to do it their way.
Yeah.
You can do it the way she learns. And so that was just for us the best option for her.
Absolutely. Well, she definitely knows how to talk in public.
Oh, yeah.
She is a great socializer. And I guess the last thing that we'll wrap up with, because this is amazing information. This is just, especially for a parent, like, of a child that is about to go into the school system, you know, and I don't think by any means you're trying to say, like, don't do the school, all this and that.
Yeah.
It's what worked for your family, and what worked, what you thought was best. But it's a little terrifying, knowing what's out there and knowing the different things and hearing stories. So just, I think what we could all collectively say is just be the advocate for your child. Make sure you're staying aware, making sure you're on top of things, and finding the right fit for your family.
Yep.
And so I guess the last question too is, you know, what is your best piece of advice it has to be for OTs, students, and parents with working with kids with Down syndrome? Only one piece of advice. Only one piece of advice for them?
Man, just one? Why do you do that to me? It has to fit both. And I guess it does fit both, is don't get so worried about comparing them to others. You know, just meet them in that moment. And don't get too wound up in that you know another 3-year-old that's doing this. Yeah. Because even typical kids vary so much on developmental milestones. Yeah. Don't get so wrapped up in that, especially so early on.
Right.
Like, don't worry about it. Things are going to come along. Like, there's definitely a light at the end of the tunnel, and no one can predict what your child's going to turn out. We had so many people tell us early on what she was and wasn't going to be able to do, and most of those weren't true at all. There was something
end up showing you up. If you tell them they can't do something, they're like,
I mean,
you bet.
we had a PT one time tell us she definitely wouldn't walk. It was like our first PT we ever got. Told us she wouldn't walk until 2 at least, and then she was walking by 15 months, I think. That's early. That's early for that diagnosis. It really is. But, like, why would you tell a parent that?
Right.
You know, so that is how it kind of ties to both. Like, don't put limitations on them. Just let's see where it goes, and let's meet them where they're at, and try to get to their potential.
Yeah. And that's really good advice.
Yes, I think that's kind of similar advice we've gotten from all of our guests so far. Is just meet the kid where it's at, and that's what OT is about. That client-centered. What is that kid doing today, right now, in this moment? And that, don't you feel like that is where you find the magic of OT? Of being able to be there in that moment with a kid and just work on what they need to do next. You know, instead of thinking of, all right, well, they're not here. They're not, you know, we got to work on this or we got to do that. Just meet them where they are that day.
Yeah, because if you're thinking about those that far in the future, but you're not looking at the here and now, you're never going to get there.
Yeah.
Right.
And if we don't tackle this, we're never going to get where you want to go. So we got to deal with this right now.
Yeah. I'm sure that goes for all kids, all diagnoses.
Yeah, it really does. It does. Yep.
But thanks for thanks for joining us.
Yes.
Glad to have you. Always.
Enjoyed it. We'll come back.
Right.
We'll do it again.
Yay!
Oh yeah.
We can talk all day.
Oh yeah, definitely. So can we.
Yes, we definitely can.
All right. Well, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the While You Grow podcast. If you learned something on this episode, please like, share, and comment. Join us next time as we dive into all things pediatrics, occupational therapy, and other important topics around children and development.